I do want to welcome in Dr. Mitch Abrams, a sports, clinical, and forensic psychologist licensed in New York and New Jersey. Dr. Abrams, an expert in anger management and violence prevention in sports. Very apt for this conversation. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I wish it wasn't necessary.
I agree. And, doctor, you've been tracking this kind of behavior in sports. The video is certainly shocking to look at, and it does seem like it's a growing trend. What are your thoughts on this?
Growing because no one does anything about it. Our society is increasingly reactive. We're not proactive. We don't put things in place in order to prevent these things from happening. People will over-identify with their sports team. If they're at a sporting event, alcohol is there. That certainly contributes to disinhibition. And the consequences are a small price to pay for a moment of glory. Not to mention how social media winds up reinforcing people for these types of things, so that if we're trying to decrease behavior and you wind up viral because you were in the middle of a fight on TV, it's giving a mixed message and, well, certainly the wrong message.
I hear you. And, one university is looking at something called COVID rage after the pandemic. One psychiatrist at Northwestern University, Dr. Aderonke Peterson, saying, quote, "What I'm seeing is pent-up tension and emotions, whether it's recent road rage incidents, more aggressive behavior reported on airline flights, and fans at sporting events being really aggressive, spitting or throwing things at players." So what is it about this point in the pandemic and people's behavior?
I don't think it has anything to do with COVID. I really don't. Our society has been increasingly violent for a long period of time. There is very little accountability. People have the right to express themselves whatever way they want, regardless of the consequences, and that can get very expansive. Are there times when people are more irritable? Sure. The pandemic wasn't fun for anyone, but that is more of an explanation than an excuse. Ultimately, if we want to see change, we have to make changes to our system. And we don't. That's not how we function. And the bottom line is until professional sports see it in their pocketbook, they're not going to make changes.
And doctor, so what do you believe needs to be done? What's the first step?
Well, I think you have to really start with youth sports. When we're talking about fandom, I don't think there's anywhere that it's more ugly than when you're watching a bunch of kids playing football or soccer, and you have parents that are yelling at the kids, physically attacking other coaches. You need to have a code of conduct in place, and there needs to be a no-nonsense, zero-tolerance accountability. And when we have coaches that are acting this way, then how can we expect athletes to not? So it's very difficult to get people to change behavior when you're talking about adults. So we have to deal with it both top down and bottom up. You have to attack this at youth sport level so that we're paying more attention to raise people the right way, that it's perfectly fine to play aggressive sports, but there's a line. And then when you talk about the higher levels of competition in pro sports, decrease the amount of alcohol sales, have a bigger security presence, have the very clear public punishments for people who engage in these behaviors. And really, we need to stop proliferating this on social media. Every time someone takes this and retweets it, it's reinforcing the behavior and instead of doing the opposite.
I hear you. Dr. Mitch Abrams, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.